Hello and welcome to Chatting Vintage Games, the only show that hopes this is not Chris's blood. Joining me today is the lovely VGC's very own master of unlocking chastity belts. That is, wink, wink. It's Jordan Middler. How are we today?
Chris, I was told to not underestimate the power of a PlayStation, and I heard
And
that
what
like
did you
a
do?
siren call and
What was
underestimated it.
What was the first thing you bloody did? Underestimated it, didn't you?
No, I'm bald. That's what happened. I underestimated the power of the PlayStation. I called Crash Bandicoot a wank, and then that was it. It all came off.
This guy used to have an afro
Yeah.
that would make 70s detectives blush. And now
I looked like that SSX character with the big ginger afro. Names on a postcard if you can remember what that person's name is.
Steven X, I believe his name was. It's named after the game. In case it wasn't already clear, we are talking about the Sony PlayStation today because it was very recently its 30th anniversary. Nothing makes you feel old than hearing a console that you enjoyed as a teenager who's now 30 years old. Can't beat it.
Straight off the bat, before we get into it, how do you feel about people now referring to it as the PS1 when the PS1 is a very specific thing? This is just the PlayStation.
Now, see, I don't mind PS1 if it's. This is where I get really pedantic about grammar. I don't mind PS numeral 1.
Yeah.
But there are some people who do PSONE, and no, that was the slim. I don't accept that whatsoever. But PS,
I think it's become kind of it's become just accepted. Like even some of PlayStation's official marketing now refers to the PlayStation as the PS1. But it's interesting. At least it's not run into the Xbox problem where it's like the Xbox, the first Xbox, the 360, the one, yeah,
and then the only. We should probably start at the start. What was your first PlayStation memory? When did you acquire one?
Now, the date, this will be off by a year, either or, but it was either Christmas 1998 or 1999, and my dad got a PlayStation, and he got Tiger Woods, probably whatever the year was, and the first Spyro, and I remember opening it in my mum and dad's room, and not really knowing what it was. I understood that it was a games thing, but I didn't really understand it beyond that, because I was like 4 or whatever, and I remember saying, I have a very clear memory of saying he got the golf game and some dragon, and that was some dragon was Spyro, and Spyro was like my mainstay for PS1, so that was my initial memory of it, because my dad had a Mega Drive and he got the PS1 with the PlayStation, but after I think that was the last console until I bought my Series S that he really had.
The glory days. I should point out, just as an aside, that if you hear any coughing in the background, it's just my wife who has the gall of staying in the living room while we're recording instead of doing the decent thing and leaving and going to another room. So if you hear any coughing in the background, that's pretty much what it is.
It's going to be the shortest CVG ever. We're going to get. No, he's not even going to announce the $2.99 yet, and it's going to be cut off.
If you hear lots of coughing and just a thump, she's basically collapsed, and like we'll finish the podcast. Don't worry. We'll finish this. She's not impressed. I think I got my PS1. I don't remember exactly when, because I think it was the last one my dad bought for me before I started buying my own, and it must have been only a few weeks after launch, because we were buying like launch games in like the kind of the second hand shops in Glasgow, so it must have only been a few weeks after launch, and the launch games we bought for it, or the games we bought for it when we got it, were Street Fighter the movie.
Nice.
Avec
Kylie Minogue.
Indeed.
Good.
And Ridge Racer. That was my 2 launch ones. So that's not a bad start.
Technically, we should be doing this in a year's time, because it didn't come out here until 1995.
That's true. That's true.
The year of my birth, I'm officially I am 3 months older than the PlayStation.
That's pathetic. I was, how old was I? In 95, I was 12. 12 years old when I got mine. Just the right time to be terrified of Resident Evil. That didn't go down too well.
What was the lead up like in the UK to when it was coming out? Was it, because obviously we'll talk about this was Sony's like first foray into the console market. But because it was out in America a year before then, was there like growing buzz for it to come out in the UK? Were people try to get them in? Were they importing them? What was the
It's
deal?
weird. I don't remember many people giving a shit, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm maybe just around my certain circles. There wasn't much chat about it. I remember I used to read Edge occasionally. Edge was pretty new at that time.
You sure you're smart enough to read Edge? That's pretty highfalutin.
That's what I'm saying. At 12, I wasn't. So we got like a few issues of it because the covers looked really cool, and I was just reading it, going, I don't understand half of this. I don't understand what frame rates are, and especially when they're introducing polygons at this point, because polygons are still a new thing. I was like, I can't get my head around this. This is mental. So it was weird when we got the PlayStation. I don't remember being massively excited for it in the weeks leading up to launch. It was like, it's out now, and my dad's like, do you want a PlayStation? Like, cause I can't remember what the occasion was, but there was an occasion to get it. I was like, aye. Well, it's the new console. I like the console, so let's see. Because obviously at this time Sony wasn't anyone in terms of video games. It was Nintendo,
the Walkman
and Sega.
people.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was this kind of theme of like this idea of like, this is going the way of the Jaguar. This is going the way of the 3DO, the CDI. Like this is going to be the next one, but whatever. The only thing I oddly remember is Blockbuster at the time were letting you rent it for something like 20 quid for 3 days. Like if you were having a party, basically you could rent out a PlayStation out of Blockbuster. And at that point I remember thinking, might as well just buy it instead of just renting it a load of times. So that's what I mean, because it famously wasn't as expensive as the Saturn.
Famously.
Which is why we ended up getting the PlayStation. I didn't get a Saturn until many years later. But yeah, the marketing for it missed me for the most part, because I think I was just a bit too young for it. That was famously the marketing for that was the kind of targeted slightly older people, the kind of club culture.
Yeah, Andy House has said that it was a lot of basically anyone that Nintendo was ignoring. They were trying to go after that. The idea was like he'd go out on a night on the Sky, as they say, and you'd come home and the PlayStation would get turned on, and that'd be the afters. Essentially, it was the afters machine. So they had PlayStations in clubs. Like the marketing material was really out there. Sean Layden, who was at PlayStation at the time, was said that they wanted to do advertisements that were like advertisements for albums, like weird music sensibility applied to games, and that went over to. Obviously, when PlayStation kicked off, they didn't have a first party because you can't just magic up a first party, but they did some marketing deals for like Namco because they had a massive partnership with them, like Tekken and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole attitude of PlayStation was sold on this, like, this isn't your little brother's pishy Mario, this is Parappa the Rapper.
Exactly. And it was a clever like 2-for-1 deal, because if you it works two ways. If you appeal to the older kid, if you appeal to the 16, 17-year-old, the 13-year-old's brother wants to see what's going on. They want to be cool as well. It doesn't work the other way around. If the 12-year-old wants something, the 18-year-old's like, I don't give a shit about that. Yeah. But if the older kid wants it, the younger kid's going, I quite fancy that as well. So it worked. It got to the kids as well as the kind of the late teens and the early 20-somethings. Funnily, I found for a while I was digitizing the old VHS promo tapes. In fact,
as one does.
Of course, that's my gig. And so if you're watching the video version of this, you're probably watching one right now, because I'll put it on just to have something to look at. Well, this is good on. They did a couple. One was called Blown Away.
Blown Away,
and it certainly was. And there was some other one I can't remember what it's called, but it was all they hired weird kind of music video type people to make weird psychedelic like footage and stuff of sand getting blown away in deserts and stuff with kind of trippy music, and then just footage of games kind of spliced in with it. And I put one on. I uploaded one to YouTube and liked it on Twitter and said, does anyone know anything about this? Because it's really cool. I want to know. And the kind of advertising guy who was in charge of it got in touch with me.
Oh,
and
really?
I spoke to him on the phone for like half an hour about it. And he basically said the cover has a picture of a guy in a hood with his hand out and holding a PlayStation controller. And he said that basically was an image they wanted to show of like, basically, without explicitly saying it, like basically make it look like PlayStation controllers drugs. and like a dealer is handing you like this. And drug culture was big at the time, and they specifically handed that image out in cardboard sheets to people leaving clubs, so they could roll them up and use them as roaches.
Yeah,
it was very clever marketing at the time.